Today I'm going to teach you how to play the London system. So normally, this is like some people call it like you do the same moves every single time, but it actually creates like a strong pressure. So normally, if you place this, your opponent will follow up with queen here. Now we play the move bishop to this spot. To put pressure. Um, your opponent could like go over here to like push pressure. They could go here. They could follow you. But for example, if they put the knight over here to defend that pawn, we put the pawn over here to defend the pawn. We do this every single time. Okay, so we can have our knight to jump up to the square over there. So we can jump our knight from here to here. Okay, now it's their turn. Normally, they will push this pawn up to defend that pawn also. So now we could jump our knight forward. Okay, for example, now if they put their bishop over here to like counter your bishop because your bishop is better, and then so now we can put this back to here. So for example, if they takes, we could take it and then we open our rook up. For example, if he doesn't take, for example, if he castles right here, and then we move our bishop up. Okay, and then he put his knights out to attack our pawn. We support our pawn. So we have a nice triangle shape pawn defense. For example, they keep on pushing. A queen over here. Okay, now we have to put our knight to this. This is the best spot in the London system since it takes control of a lot of squares and it prevents from that pawn to like push forward. Also, we have like a bishop and a pawn supporting this, so we can definitely win this, and then we can take control of the center. And we can force that knight and then put pressure on the king. So we're going to drop the knight. Now we can put this singular pawn up forward to support our knights even more. So for example, they put a random move over here. Now, we could push this up, or we could push it up to defend the knight. And then if they take the knight, and then if they, for example, if they take the knight, we can take it with the bishop. We can take it with the pawn, then the bishop. We can take control of the center. So for example, if they take it, wait a second. So for example, if we push this pawn forward, for example, if we push this thing somewhere like back or forward somewhere, for example, we castle right here. Now they take the we take the pawn. Now we have put pressure, and then now they jump their knights back, and then for example, if they after they jump their knight forward, we could actually put our pawn forward. That's completely fine. So we can take with the bishop, push it with the put force on the double pawn. We could also like do something else, like if for example they don't counter it, we could like move our bishop. So like you see we have a bishop over here, we could move it to here and then like pin the knight over there, and then that will always give you like advantages. So for example, if we go back to the beginning, if black played c5 in this position, for example, if we after we did this, black plays c5, and then now we have now it's their turn. They probably going to like now we move our knight forward. Now they put their queen over here. It's scary because they're gonna take this pawn and take our rook. So now if we go over here, and then for example, if the queen takes this, that's a tricky move since after you take this, you could put your knight to this spot, and then so you could hop your knight to this spot and then do a fork over here. For example, if they try to take your rook also, like they okay, never mind, that's a bad move. Okay, for example, if they jump their knight out, you could force your rook over here. You could force the queen away, and then for example, if they take this pawn, you could go with really easy, and then the queen is trapped inside 8-2, and then we can sacrifice the rook. For example, if we do this, if they move the queen to this spot, we can sacrifice the rook. And then they take it, and then we do like a fork over here. There's no way for them to defend this, and then we can take that free rook over here. So that pins the rook and the king over there. This position is pretty devastating. So the queen d6 is like a really bad option. Okay. The thing that I want to add is that if they don't put the queen over here, our knights. Actually, I'm gonna go back one more. We could also play this. This is Jobaba version. If they put like a pawn over here, so we could also jump our knight out. We could castle. We could develop our pawn, and then it's gonna be a very good thing. If we put this knight out, we could also jump our other knights to this spot to protect our knight. So, and then for example, they jump their knight also, and okay, and then we can jump our knight. And then in that way, when the queen comes out, we can take the pawn and then prevent the attack. Okay, now for example, we pretend that you just continue to develop. They didn't put a c5. For example, it's just a normal opening, and then for them, they put bishop out to copy your moves. Okay, now you can push this pawn up to put pressure, and then you can move so now you can move your queen to this side and then take that rook. Okay, so we're gonna go over here. Okay, since the bishop abandoned that spot, now we can take that rook. They could also do like different stuff also. So for example, if we start with the Londen system, the pawn, they do not push the pawn forward. They push the knight forward. We could do the same with the bishop out. F4, and then for example, they're doing the King's Indian. And then now we can, this is always recommended, we could put jump our knights out. And then for example, they do the King's Indian, and then they start forcing so we cannot jump the knight on that square. And then now we put the queen over here so we can line the queen with the bishop, and then we can take that bishop, we can put the bishop over here and we can trade the bishop, and then that will put pressure. Since for the King's Indian, they want the king to castle on this side, so the king goes here, the rook goes here. So if we took this, we have like a whole big pressure over here, and then we can push the pawns over on this side forward, and then all the way forward, and we can sacrifice the rook and checkmate. So we're gonna jump our queen to this spot, and then we can then castle below at the queen side. Okay, and then we can also be putting this pawn up to support our pawn. There's many different moves, and then it's always really good. So for example, they did not place the bishop over there. They placed the queen's pawn now to take control of the center. We will be putting the king's pawn to this space. Okay, now, for example, they put bishop. Now they do the Londen System, and we play amazing move. This always brings like the winning bar up really high, because like, if they castle, they can be put pressure on the king so much. Okay, now we could do since our rook is defending it, so it's completely fine. For example, they castle right here, and we move forward. If they take it with a knight, we can sacrifice our rook. They take it with, and then we sacrifice the rook, and then now we have the queen pressure over here, and then we can move our bishop over here, and then forced to checkmate, and they have nothing to do with it. So like for example, they cannot do anything with this, by the way. If they block it, you could just take it, and then you could just do checkmate. If they somehow like move like a space for the king, you still do the same thing. They could jump their king over there, but they're going to lose position really quickly. And that's going to be like a free pawn over there. Okay, now for example, if they didn't move that, we didn't manage to push our pawn forward. They did not castle right now. Instead, they pushed in just in case that somehow you get like checkmated. And then now the real problems. Now we could still like have advantages since we can jump our knight over here, jump our knight over here, and we can create the London system, and then it takes that pawn, that space, that space, that space. It takes a wide control of the center. Okay. So we could also move our bishop out, and then you could still put like really big pressure in the center. And then, for example, the king's Indian. If we go back, okay, we go back even more. For example, we are right over here. They just move that pawn over forward. And then we can go the knights, and we can go for the long castle. This is highly recommended, as so like it keeps our king safe, and then you can push the other side's pawn forward, and then you place the exact same like same move, and then it will be like a really great thing. So what you're thinking of, like you should do like a really early c5 stuff for them. And then so now you move forward to take control of the center. Okay, now if we go over here, they cannot take the pawn because our queen's defending. Now if they go over here, they're trying to put pressure like to take our rook. And then for example, now we jump our knight out, and then now they take it, and then they're going to put like pressure on our rook over there. We jump our bishop back because we have to protect the knight, and the next move we could be like developing our pawns like forward, to start developing, early develop. So if your opponent does not play like the queen's move, it's gonna move this to create a strong defense. Okay, now we can jump our knight out, and then we're going to be playing the same stuff. We're going to put the king's pawn like up to defend our pawn over there and to take control of the center. For example, if they if we just did this and then they just did this, we could just put d5, and then which allows us to jump the knight to protect that pawn. We can move our bishop, the same thing as the London system. It's always the same. And then we can put the king pawns forward. Okay, so if they do the Dutch, they could go over here and put pressure in the center. We would do the same. We could put the bishop over here. But we could also attack this pawn. Also, we could put this pawn forward, defense it, and then it can defense it. You can also sometimes you get some player doing this. This trying to take the center of the file by putting the king's pawn forward. And then it counters the London. So basically, if you jump your knight out, they could also do this, and then you force it back, and then they put the rook's pawn forward, and then they can take advantages. If we could play like this, and then if they play aggressively, and we jump our knights back, now we can develop our bishop over the white square bishop, and then we could also like then move this pawn forward, develop our bishop, all of those kind of sort of moves. It's all fine.